Commentary Booth is a show for media lovers by media lovers just like you. If you want to support the show, go to pariomagazine.com.au. Welcome to the Commentary Booth, where we watch and you guessed it, commentate on the week that was in movies and TV. I'm your host and play-by-play commentator Jamie Apps, and each week I'm joined by a rotating cast of colour commentators to help you find your next viewing treat. This week I'm joined by a communications advisor and video game writer who lists their favourite movie as The Last Crusade and favourite TV show as Breaking Bad. Welcome to the show, John O'Peck.
Thanks, Jamie. It's good to be here. It's been a while in between podcasts together, but I'm sure we'll slide right back into it.
Yeah, it has been a while, but with Breaking Bad being your favourite show, it's a very good time to be talking to you, I guess.
I was actually having a sad moment today where I realized that we're probably not going to get any more from that universe unless Vince Gilligan picks up the typewriter again, but never say never, I guess.
Yeah, I think they've kind of said essentially
Hinted at
it's
it, yeah.
over, so that's a bit sad. But what did you think of Better Call Saul and the ending?
Are we full spoiling it or not? Because I don't know. I mean, if I was going spoiler free, I'd say that as I tweeted out earlier in the week, I really think that they nailed the landing with the ending. Similar to Breaking Bad, that whole final season just went in a lot of surprising places that, you know, I was trying to predict where it was going to end, and it didn't go anywhere near what I thought would happen. So they did that, and they managed to give appropriate send-offs to all the most beloved characters, not just from Better Call Saul, from like the whole of that world. So I thought that it was really well handled, and I couldn't have asked for anything better. They always out-deliver my expectations, those guys. So yeah, very happy fan over here.
Yeah, totally agreed. I think that last season of both shows was just incredible, with especially this last one with all the Easter eggs and things that they did weave in there. It was like, wow, I don't know. It felt like they made Breaking Bad better by doing Better Call Saul, which is not usually what you would expect with a spin-off.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. And there's a few properties that have done that. A few things like Rogue One with like Star Wars. I think that makes some of the what were perceived as maybe flaws in A New Hope makes them even more fun to go back and look at now. So and I guess the Obi-Wan series that just came out, that kind of changes the way that you look at both prequels and, you know, episode 4. So yeah, it's good when a supporting or like a complementary piece of content can make the original better rather than worse, which is a risk, I suppose, when you go back to something that's so beloved.
Yeah, totally. And I guess we're going to get another spin-off and see how that goes back with House of the Dragon coming out shortly as well.
Indeed.
So on to sort of the main topic for the week, though. We're going to be chatting about exploring the timeline and chatting about the Amazon Prime adaptation of the Paper Girls comic book. So it's basically a comic book that follows 4 young girls who, while out delivering on their morning paper route, the day after Halloween in 1988, become caught in a conflict between warring factions of the Time Wars. Overall, on like a top level, without spoilers, we'll get into spoilers afterwards. What did you think of this series? And did you have like a background in the show beforehand?
I didn't at all. I've just heard people talk about the series in relation to the comic as it was announced, saying, you know, that they hope it will do it justice, and that I think that the consensus that I've been seeing around just Twitter and stuff is that fans of the graphic novel or the comic have been happy with it. So I was always planning to check it out, but then my dad actually was the one that said that it was really good. I don't know why he watched it, but he did, and he enjoyed it. So I thought, okay, if he likes it, then I'm probably really going to like it, because I'm a much bigger nerd than him. And I really did like that it seems to, like, the reductive or the really simple way to put it is like Stranger Things, but they're girls, and crossed with Back to the Future. Like that, it's so much more than that, but that's a great way to pitch it, I think. And it nailed all those the best of those things. I think it stands alone as its own thing. I could see people thinking that it's like ripping off Stranger Things, but it's
Oh yeah.
from what I understand, it came like the comic book came out before Stranger Things, so the Duffer Brothers may have even ripped off Paper Girls in some ways. Like, you know, it's an '80s thing. They're riding around on their bikes for part of it, so it's definitely a throwback to that '80s, some of those '80s tropes. But yeah, in general, I think that it was really good. The cast blew me away, especially since they're like on the younger side of the teenage years. These four girls, especially, and the extended cast, like the adult cast, I think that they were all really great too. So, as a big Stranger Things fan, I was happy to see something like similar, but drawing on much different influences also from the '80s. You know, there's a bit more like Terminator, a bit more Back to the Future in this, rather than, I guess, the Stand By Me and Nightmare on Elm Street or whatever from Stranger Things.
Yep.
How about yourself?
Yeah, I enjoyed this as well. I didn't have any sort of prior knowledge going into it apart from the trailer,
Hmm.
which, and like you, I'd sort of heard people talk about it, but I'd never actually dove in myself. And then watching the trailer, I was a little bit skeptical. Like, I don't feel like it was a great trailer. And the first episode was a bit iffy for me as well. But once I got through that first episode, watched, I think, episode 2 and 3 in my first sitting with the show, I was sold. I was 100% sold after episode 2, I think, and then episode 3 just cemented that for me. And yeah, like it has a lot of those nostalgia things. 8 episodes, and the first one's quite short, but I think we'll get into my issues with it later. But yeah, overall, like really
Sure.
enjoyed it, and the nostalgia was awesome. And like you said, it was so the comic came out. The series started in 2015, concluded in 2019. So yeah, you were right. I think it probably did influence Stranger
Yeah,
Things rather than Stranger Things influencing the show.
sure. Yeah.
What else did I have? And yeah, like you said, the characters also like really grew on me over time as well. Like they were enjoyable to begin with, but the more you got to learn about their backstories and the issues that they were dealing with along the way made them so much more lovable and endearing.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I suppose on the surface at the beginning, they seem like four kind of not tropey characters, but they're very clear like archetypes where, you know, you've got the kind of nerdy Asian kid and the badass from the wrong side of the tracks. So then you got
Hmm.
a, you know, the well-to-do Jewish girl and the brainiac African American student that's trying to, you know, excel in their studies. And that those four descriptions that I've just used are still true by the end of it, but they flesh it out, and you get a really, I think, well-rounded character for each of them by the end of it, with flaws and with nuances and ways that they surprise you in their personalities, which is, I think, true to life as well. You know, it's nostalgic not just in the influences of the show, but nostalgic in the memories of what it was like to be a teenager as well, I think.
Hmm. And like we get a lot of growth with the characters as well, which I thought was important. They didn't just stick
Mm,
to being what they were at the beginning of the series.
yeah, yeah. In a short amount of time for them, it's only feels like it's only a few days or a week or so. I can't remember exactly.
Yep. And on that cast, so did you have a standout one of the girls that stood out to you?
Yeah, I think the actor who plays Mac, Sophia Rosinski, was my favorite because that character is so um I don't know, just complex and complicated. She is, you know, from those four descriptions, I guess she's the badass from the wrong side of the tracks,
Hmm.
who has a bit of a chip on her shoulder, and the way that that actor portrays it is just so like sh- from the first line she delivers, you're like, oh, the kind of person, that's the kind of kid she is. With the, it helps that she's got like basically the John Connor haircut and
Yep.
look about her. It's almost like a gender swap of John Connor from T2.
Yep.
um, it's kind of eerie almost to that point, but yeah, just the attitude is jumping off the screen. And I couldn't believe it when I think she said that she was 12 years old or something. um I think I think in real life she's more like 15 or 16.
Mhm.
So that makes a lot more sense based on just how much, like how well she carries herself and how confident she is.
Yep.
But with that aside, yeah, I thought she was my standout, but all four of them really, like, again, like Stranger Things, they just really nailed this. And if it's going to go, I don't know how long the comic runs for, if it's like a multi-year thing, but if it does go, if we see these kids grow up like we have with Stranger Things, I think they really picked the right four kids to do it with.
Yeah, totally. Mac was my standout as well. I thought Tiff, Cameron Jones playing Tiff was also really good. But yeah,
Mhm.
Mac, I think just, yeah, Mac's character just is so important. But it is cool that they all have, throughout the 8 episodes, I think they all sort of have 1 or 2 episodes where it really focuses on them. So you do
Mhm.
get to know them quite well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And then in terms of like the adult cast as well, we had Adina Porter as Prioress, Nate Chaudhry as Larry, Cliff Chamberlain as Dylan, so Mac's brother, and then
Hmm.
Jason Mantzoukas as the grandfather leader of the Old Watch. I thought that was a random choice.
Yeah, it was, because everything that we're kind of familiar with him from is, like, at least in my experience, is straight up just like over the top comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you think of his turns in like Brooklyn Nine-Nine or The Good Place, or his voice role in Big Mouth. I
Yeah,
can't really
I
think of
always
anything
picture
where.
him in The League, the fantasy
Right.
football
Yeah.
show.
Yeah. I'm not. I'd be surprised. I mean, I've got his IMDb here in front of me, so I might have a quick look. But I can't really think of any straight roles that he's played where he's just playing a straight up drama. And this is a drama, but at the same time, the way that that character is played is, it's almost like it is a comic reliefy kind of thing, when he's like dressed in t-shirts when everyone else that he's working with is in like a futuristic spacesuit.
Mm-hmm.
So it is kind of a contrast, and it does make you kind of go, well, why is he, like, how does he fit into this picture? um but it doesn't mean that I didn't like it, because I just love him in general. So yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely a memorable character, but yeah, like he does feel a little bit out of place, but it worked, so you can't really complain too much.
That's it. There's some other adult characters. I don't know if they are spoilers or not if we talk about them. Um, but yeah, there were some other adult characters that I thought were really well performed as well.
Okay, yeah,
We
I
might get
wanted
to
to
later.
leave some of those ones until we
Okay.
sort of start to move on a bit further.
Yep. All
Uh,
good.
and then like, my last couple of notes before we get into the episodes and the full spoilers. The series has been in development since 2019. They've officially greenlit the show in July 23rd, 2020. And then they actually managed to film this and get it all completed from March of 2021. It was supposed to begin filming, but it got delayed to May 17th of 2021.
Okay.
And then they finished by October 1st. So they did the filming quite quickly and have turned around the release schedule quite quickly as well. So especially with the amount of
Yeah,
sort of
that's
special
good.
effects elements in there as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I guess there's probably not special effects in every episode, but there's certainly a few where it's quite heavy, and um, not that it's over the top or anything, but yeah, it's it's a good effort in for what things have been like the last few years.
Hmm.
I guess they probably intended to release it sooner than they did, so I'm glad it got to see the light of day.
Yeah, I'm sure there would have been concerns when COVID hit that they were going to lose this show entirely, but thankfully it stuck around.
Especially when you have young actors that are always just aging all the time.
Yeah, also another big concern.
Yeah.
Uh, so we'll get into like full spoilers now and go sort of episode by episode. There's just a few highlights in each episode.
Mhm.
Um, Episode 1, Growing Pains, where we're first introduced to the girls on the day after Halloween. And then
Hell Day.
Hell Day, yes, and they get attacked by a bunch of random bullies for some no unknown reason, just because they can.
Yep.
And then they encounter the time jumpers and get involved in this war totally accidentally, and then eventually Mac accidentally shoots Erin. What did you think of that moment?
Yeah, it's always frustrating when something like that happens on a show. Like someone has a gun and then people are so adamant on them not using it that they cause it to go off.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what happened, I guess. Because I think it was like it was KJ like kind of grappling with it and it went off. So yeah, it's kind of a cheap way to have someone shot, but it was a good way to introduce a kind of the sci-fi element of the healing bugs, and that certainly came back into it way later in the final episode. So I can see why they did it. It just yeah, it was a little bit like, oh, that's how they're gonna do this one, is it? Yeah.
Yep. And having no prior knowledge of the series, like I thought there was a good chance that Erin might die in that moment as well. And I was like, oh, we're gonna be introduced to these girls and gonna lose one straight away. But yeah, like you said, they bring out the weird robotic bugs to heal her, which that was one of my big issues with this episode in particular, that I didn't think those bugs looked great. And I felt like in that, I think episode 1 is the shortest of the series as well, and they cram a lot into that episode, and I feel like it felt rushed, and I didn't quite grasp what was happening until it was like over, and then I was kind of in a bit of a daze of what did I just witness. And then it wasn't until episode 2 where they started to explain things a bit more, and then I was okay, I understand this story now.
Yeah, interestingly, like that's the lowest rated episode on IMDb by quite a long way. It's like a 6.8 out of 10, whereas the rest of them range between 7.5 and 8. Not that, that's the be all and end all, but it does give an indication that I guess people that use that rating system seem to think it started off a bit slower and picked up as it went along. But for me, I didn't mind at all because I didn't even watch the trailer, so I went in completely blind. So every little thing about it was still kind of like a reveal to me. Like, oh, it's like, oh, that's why it's called Paper Girls. They're
Mm-hmm.
they're delivering newspapers, and then they don't know it. Like, I guess the four of them don't know each other, and revealing each of those kind of archetypes, like I was talking about before, for the characters, and trying to piece together in my head, like, how are they going to travel through time? Why is the sky turning pink, and all this kind of thing. So, I still enjoyed that first episode quite a bit, and yeah, it's probably only in comparison to the others that it probably is lesser, I think.
Okay, yeah. Hearing you say that you hadn't seen the trailer, that makes me think that perhaps the trailer wasn't all that helpful in this show, because I had seen the trailer and I feel like a lot of the clips in the trailer come from that first episode. So I can sort of
Sure.
see why that is a bit disappointing for people.
Mm.
But also to lead off with perhaps the weakest episode of the series, not a great sign either, because how many people are going to push through and watch another episode just to make sure?
Yeah, I guess that's one of the things with time travel, isn't it? Like the fun begins when you get to introduce that thing of seeing characters react to, you know, their future selves, or new technologies, like they're going into the future and finding smartphones and the internet, and like all that kind of stuff's quite fun. Um, so yeah, it is not until later that that all happens. So the first one is really setting the table, and it's a shame that, I guess, just based on the concept of what it is, I guess like the first 10 minutes of Back to the Future is probably not as interesting as
Mm.
when he actually goes back in time or whatever. It's just the way it goes, I guess.
And then, yeah, so from there we go on to episode 2, where we do finally get that fun time travel element, and they're introduced to the older versions of themselves. And we get Erin meets her adult self first.
Hmm.
What did you think of that moment? I thought that was a really important, pivotal moment that sealed it for me.
Yeah, I'm a big Ali Wong fan. That's what I wanted to say earlier. Just seeing her in something like this that's not a comedy is great because she's a brilliant comedian. But to see her get to play a dramatic role like that, where she's kind of the buzzkill,
Mhm.
was a bit different. And that's kind of where they introduce this theme that's becomes central throughout the whole show of I guess that idea of what would your younger self think of you as an adult.
Yep.
So if we're watching this as adults coming at it from the adult perspective, that's what we're thinking, like, oh, what would my younger self think of me now? Like, would they think that I'm a success? Would they think that I'm a failure? Would they be embarrassed by how things turned out? Would they be proud of how their future turned out? And also, what do I if I met my younger self, would I even like them?
Mhm.
Would we get along? Like, it's such an interesting concept to watch unfold, but also think about yourself. I found that was quite fun as well.
And yeah, like we sort of immediately get that bit of tension between the older Eren and the child Eren, so that it was a good first person to meet, I think, where they didn't just immediately bond and click straight away.
Yes, and because so much had changed with her relationship with the sister, passing of her mother, not having a family, not having children, not having a job that she was thrilled about, and that kind of thing. It's very sobering, um, I guess, reality for a lot of people, that maybe that their lives don't always go the way that they dream as children.
Oh, totally. Uh, and then sort of adult Eren gets roped into this whole time war as well when she activates the device that they're given in episode 1, and suddenly has a heads up display that she has no idea what is going on. And I thought that was a fun way to keep her involved rather than her just like, no, I don't want to be hands off. I'm out of this. And she still has to be a part of it because she's now totally attached to this part.
Yeah, it's an interesting wrinkle to have. First of all, like this Men in Black style kind of group that's running around doing weird sci-fi stuff that no one else seems to know about. Um, so for her to, yeah, as you said, get wrapped up in that um, against her will, really, she'd probably much rather just stay out of it.
Mhm.
Seems like, and disassociate. But yeah, you're right. It was a good way to keep her on the hook for a few episodes.
And then to close out that episode 2, the series gets quite dark when Prioress goes to KJ's house, and the
Yeah.
implication is that she murders the parents. So that was quite confronting. It was like, oh, this show is going to go to quite dark places when it needs to.
Yeah, and that was the moment that started to make me think, like, is this a divergent timeline, or is this the like the one true timeline that things will inevitably reach?
Mhm.
Um the way they reacted to that hockey stick showing up with kind of bewilderment, it made me think, like, did something happen to KJ as well? Like, did something happen to her? Did something happen to the hockey stick? Or were they just surprised to see it because so much time had passed? They seem to react in a very specific way to that, to the question about was it theirs? So yeah, what did you think that was about? Am I reading into it too much?
Yeah, I guess looking back on it now, they do react like, wait, why is this hockey stick here? Whereas I guess if it was just something that was in your house all the time, it wouldn't be that weird that it was still there. after so many years. So it feels like, yeah, something
Yeah,
obviously did happen where they thought it would be gone.
yeah. She's like, it that can't be possible, or she says something like, it can't be, or that's yeah. So it made me think like, is it like one of those? Is it that KJ and the other four went forward in time? They took the hockey stick. The hockey stick was like left in the future, and then they returned and got their minds wiped. Like it's just makes you start to think about like whether we've got those two diverging timelines, or if it's a Back to the Future thing where you change the past or you change the future and it has kind of ripples onto other things.
Yeah, well, then I guess a few more spoilers. Like later in the season, we do find out that there is a weird time loop happening. So perhaps, yeah,
Mm.
they have at some point taken this hockey stick and moved it somewhere else. So they're wondering how it did get to here. So hopefully in future seasons, we expand on things like that a bit more.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see if it shows up again, or if I'm just reading into it.
got writer's brain happening too much and you're
Yeah,
trying to pin down every
maybe
little moment.
it's possible.
Episode 3 had a very big moment for our favorite Mac when she meets the grown-up version of her brother Dylan, who she is stunned to learn is now a doctor. What did you think of that moment? I thought that was such a big moment for her.
Definitely, and it was kind of a two-pronged thing, because first of all it was like, oh, like her brother, against all odds, based on what we know about her family, like he turned out really well, which is a happy moment, followed by learning that she died a few years later, and that was what inspired him to become a better person, to become a doctor, a healer, I guess. So yeah, very heavy, very dark as well for a teenager to have to deal with that kind of concept, and just a total mind blowing moment. It's fun to moment for Dylan, where he realizes that this isn't a prank. It's not someone that's
dug into my history and is
an
like,
impression of my dead sister. Yeah. Like he does the DNA test, and it's like it's a good moment.
oh yeah, like I thought that was such a big moment. And like you said, she has to then grapple with, is there any point of my life, like if I'm supposed to be dead and I had cancer at such a late stage, like why do I even bother anymore in this version of myself? Like I probably have the cancer already. What's the point of continuing this fight? Should I just try and be happy in this moment instead?
Yeah, and it's also she doesn't really express this, but in my head I'm thinking, it, like, is it worth her sacrifice to, I guess, die from cancer, to turn and save lives through his profession of going into the medical field? Not that it's ever worth someone dying, but like in her grappling with what might be inevitable, does that make it a bit of an easier pill to swallow? If that makes sense.
Uh, like yeah. If maybe if her death is like a requirement for him to become successful, but then I guess now that they've somehow they've time traveled, so does this now alter everything in the past, which is an issue that we always have to deal with time travel. Of does the time travel itself break everything?
Yeah, that's right.
And then the other big shock of that episode was we learned that there is a giant mech in Larry's grain silo. I thought that was a big revelation that I was not expecting there to be giant mechs in this universe.
No, that's kind of the moment that you kind of remember that it's based on a comic book. So there could be some of that manga influence shining through, perhaps, in that moment.
Yeah, and then I guess we also have a later point we have dinosaurs and everything as well. So yeah, we kind of just have to expect a bit of everything in this
Yes.
universe, I
Also,
think.
also very, yeah, definitely, yeah.
And then in terms of that mech in episode 4, Erin is told that because she has this heads up display connection with the time device, that she is now a robot mech pilot and she has to drive this thing and somehow manages to do that.
She did very well.
And then in terms of Mac as well, we also see her interacting with Dylan and Dylan's wider family, where he sort of suggests that maybe he could adopt her and have her live with him. And but then on the meeting with the first meeting with Dylan's daughters, who are a similar age to Mac in the show, what did you think of that interaction? I thought Dylan's oldest daughter was not the nicest person.
No, I guess it kind of speaks to the affluence that Dylan's raised them with. Very like it's that stark contrast from the way he grew up, and you can kind of see, okay, maybe he's trying to give them something that's far and away different from his experience as a child, as far as the type of, or the lack of nurturing that he had. But it may have produced a bit of a bratty private school kind of daughter there, and yeah, you could definitely see a big clash happening if Mac stayed there as like an adopted daughter, as was the plan.
Yeah, like she just comes off as super entitled, and Mac is just not having a bar of her at all, and there is a little bit of tension there. So, yeah, I don't think that would have really worked out long term if they had been forced to live together.
Yeah.
What else did we get? And then they finally get the mech suit machine, and they go through the time fold at the farm, and that kicks us into episode 5, which immediately starts out in a way that I wasn't expecting, like full bore story mode, where they come out of the time fold and then they're immediately encountered by another even bigger, more intense mech, and we have a big battle, and adult Erin is killed in that battle, and I was like, whoa, that's a heck of a way to start an episode. I thought that would typically be an ending of an episode.
Yeah, it was definitely a way to set them off in a new time zone, like a new I was going to say time zone, but a new year. That self-destruct button, yeah, it got used, so it was a pretty dramatic moment, and probably traumatizing for the 4 girls to witness that, which they didn't really hone in on. That's something that, like, for these young people to be experiencing, they haven't really honed in on the trauma of it so much. I think they just seem to be like either trying to figure out how to fix it, or just kind of dealing with it. There's not really any overwhelming moments for most of them. So that's something that, I mean, not that you want to see for young people just crying for 40 minutes every episode, but that moment in particular would have messed up Erin pretty badly, I think.
Yeah, like they do touch on that a little bit with her being like a little bit traumatized and down about it, but yeah, literally watching yourself sacrifice your life as an adult to save these people, and they just kind of how do we continue and move on with this war was a little bit strange. But then later in the episode they have another moment which
it was a nice it wasn't.
Go ahead.
So I was gonna say it was kind of a nice redemption arc for adult Erin to have that moment of, my life hasn't turned out as well as it could have, but I'm going to do something important here to, give these young people another chance, or whatever it might be.
Yep. But then, like, as the episode moves on, we get into another moment that is traumatic in a different way, but they kind of linger on this one a little bit more when the younger Erin begins to experience her first period, and like they sat with that
Yeah,
moment longer than they sat with adult Erin dying.
it was interesting just as something that doesn't happen in TV or or film or anything really. Like it's still kind of a taboo topic or an unpleasant thing or an awkward, I guess maybe more of an awkward thing that people just don't want to write about or watch. But I thought that it was done really well. The amount of confusion and um, just cluelessness that the four girls between them
Mm-hmm.
had about that moment. I can like speaking as a um, male with no sisters or anything. I can only really imagine that that's true to life for a lot of young people. And usually there is at least an adult that can be talked to, but they're just here on their own. So even more of that kind of worst possible time for that to happen.
Yeah, I thought it was really well done as well. Again, as a guy with no female siblings, a little bit strange, but talking to some people about it, they said it was very accurate as well. So I thought that was a really nice way to do it. And yeah, like you said, they didn't have an adult that they could just be like, how do I use this? And then they're reading the box and they're like, there's no instructions. There's no instructions anywhere. What?
Yeah, it reminded me of Curb Your Enthusiasm episode where Larry David has to talk a Girl Scout through the same kind of thing when she's visiting his house. And yeah, I mean, if a young girl was under my care in that moment, I would not have any clue how to advise them. I'd be reading the instructions in the exact same way. So yeah, it was relatable in that sense. I guess I would be just as clueless as those teenage girls.
Oh yeah, I'd be looking for an instruction booklet in that box somewhere, being like, "Please help me, something help." Straight to Google. And then to close out the episode, the girls go to KJ's home where there's a tiki party going on, and this is where KJ sort of has her big futuristic revelation where she finds out that her older self is a lesbian, and she's kind of shocked at this and lashes out at Mac. Did you feel that was really well done as well?
Yeah, I didn't see that coming and just until just before it happened, I guess. That big reveal. I guess because she's at an age where like sexuality isn't even a thing on her mind. It's not even, not that there's been any moments on this show where I guess they could have foreshadowed it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because just of this situation, they're very much just trying to survive and get back home. So to see that moment, it was more, I guess, a statement about, oh, my life isn't going to turn out like the way my mother has been planning. This is a scary thing because it was almost like just a given that she was going to do all these things that her mother had laid out for her. And then, yeah, to see that followed up with her having that conversation at the movie theater, I thought was a really um, genuine and kind of well written discussion with the girlfriend of her older self. And yeah, that was a like similar to the other girls before her, a really interesting wrinkle in what it would be like to discover something about your future self that you don't know about yourself in the present.
Yeah, and I thought it was almost like a commentary on how much the world had changed between the late 80s and the late 90s as well, where late 80s KJ thought that, yeah, that was like really awkward and strange, whereas 90s KJ was like, this is just who I am and how things are. There's nothing weird and strange about this.
Yeah, and it also lines up with her like going to film school, where the younger version of her had like no interest or passion for film or anything like that, and it was just kind of like, wow, that's like a random future for me. It'll be like you or I being told that, in 10 years we're going to be in a completely different place than we are now. It would make sense in the moment, but without the gradual steps to get there, it's just like, you kidding me? Like, I never would have seen. There's things about my life that I never would have seen coming 10 years ago. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, totally. And then we go from there to episode 6, Matinee, where, yeah, like you mentioned, we have the further conversation between KJ and adult or older KJ. And then this is where we also get introduced to Tiff and the older version of Tiff. I'm pretty sure that's this episode, where they arrive at a random private rave party, and that's where they meet older Tiff as a DJ at this event. That was a very weird place to meet someone for the first time.
Especially for a bunch of kids.
Yeah, a bunch of 12-year-old kids, and nobody says anything. Nobody's like, why are you here?
Yeah, I hope she was making some really good money that night to not just be like, I'm going to go home. There's something's come up. The past version of myself has just called me on the phone, so I'm not going to go to work tonight.
Yeah, there's a 12-year-old girl that wants to come to this party. Yeah, that's fine.
Let her bring her friends.
And then like they go into the bathroom and they're like, "There's no toilet paper," and the taps don't work. Well, that sounds like a rave. But then we sort of begin to learn about adult Tiff as well, and she confesses that she dropped out of MIT to become a DJ, which shocks the younger Tiff as well. She's kind of just like, "No, we were going to do this, and we are determined to become like this really highly qualified individual," and none of that happens. So she's quite disappointed. And then Mac reveals to KJ what she learned from Dylan.
Yeah, I like the reveal of first of all, Tiff was just getting along swimmingly with her older self, and Erin and one of the other girls was like, just wait for it. It's gonna, I'm sure, as she gets to know her, it'll all go backwards. And sure enough, it does when they start to argue about the importance of college and playing the game of the corporate whatever, and just the adult Tiff is very much like against the man and education and institutionalized education, I guess, and all that kind of stuff, whereas the younger version is very much on that career path, I suppose. So that did lead, I guess, to some interesting stuff later. When you know where she ends up in 2019. There's also might have been probably was it the next episode, the reveal about the adoption?
Yes. So episode 7, we get the revelation that she was adopted.
Yeah, because I found that was a pretty big moment
from MIT,
too,
rather than quitting.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing that again makes you think like you're now not only are these girls going through the experience of time travel, but you're now telling them things about their life that will forever change the trajectory of their relationships and their hobbies and their passions. So like you're already messing with who they're going to become, and what's that going to do to them. Like it's just a very interesting concept.
Yeah, and like as we've sort of seen, like with other time travel stories, like does telling Tiff that she's adopted before she's supposed to know affect their relationship? Does telling her that she drops out of MIT because of that affect her scholastic achievements and progress as well. So maybe she doesn't ever get into MIT to begin with.
Mm.
And Mac learning that she has cancer and dies, does she just give up on everything? So it'll be
Yeah,
interesting.
Or does she try to prove herself wrong?
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see, like, if we get subsequent
Yeah.
seasons, how all of these sort of dominoes being tipped over in random points along the timeline, how do they all converge to wrap up the show?
Yeah, definitely.
And like I said, with Mac revealing to KJ what she'd learned from Dylan as well, like I thought that sort of brought those two together as well a lot more. So it was cool to see sort of groups of the girls splitting off at different points and having moments to bond as one-on-one individuals rather than just the entire series trying to bond as a group.
Yeah, for sure. It was it was really well done, giving the different girls moments with each other one on one to either bond or hash out their issues with each other and their clashes and their personalities, and things to bond over too. I thought that was done in a really authentic way.
And like the moment that I think Mac and KJ really do cement their friendship is when they go to the cemetery in episode 7 to visit Mac's grave, which is really like morbid, but I guess you would want to do that if you learnt that you should be dead already, I guess. Hard to conceptualize, but they finally encounter an adult that they didn't intend to when they run into Alice, Mac's stepmother, and kind of just run away from her. And it'd be interesting to see how Alice knowing that impacts the story further down as well.
Yeah, that was one of the definitely one of the character moments that was left a little bit unsettled, or not unsettled, but it's not that Pario hasn't been wrapped up yet. I guess it's a thread that hasn't been tied off with the fact that Alice took this special interest in her after she got sick, and what exactly was their relationship? Because it just seems like to us it might be like, sure, like your stepmom's sad that you died. That's not that surprising, but Mac is just absolutely floored by it completely. So it would be interesting to see Mac maybe come around to realizing some things about her own family. Maybe it's not as bad as she thinks, or maybe again it's like, did her getting sick change not just her brother and his approach to life, but everybody in the family? Like, did they all just become decent people because of what they saw her go through? Like, did she inspire just a whole change of everyone that she knew through her bravery or whatever it might have been?
Yeah, like
as her brother said.
Like you said, yeah, was her passing something that was required to change the lives of 4 or 5 different people rather than it being less of a selfish thing of, oh, I've died.
Which is a heavy thing for a child to have to come to realize, or to come to terms with. It'll be hard enough for you or I to say, sure, maybe I'm going to die, or I'm going to die young, or I'm going to die tragically. But I could probably say, if it makes everybody in my life better in some way, then maybe it was worth it. Like, that would be a really hard thing to come to terms with. But I think as an adult, it's possible. But for a child, it would be really difficult to have to watch her have to grasp that. It's tough to watch, but at the same time, it makes the show even that more compelling, I think.
Oh, totally agree. And then we close out with episode 8, It Be Over. Well, that was a funny title. And they give them one chance to get home after the Old Watch invade Larry's farm, and they essentially turn it down because I think there's like, they're going to have to, people are going to die and they're going to get their their minds wiped and they don't want to forget this whole experience that they've been through, even though it has been super traumatic. But then we also are introduced to the concept of they aren't just traveling through time, they're like stuck in this weird time loop because they've been interacting with the timeline over this series. And they find out that the voice that they heard in episode 1 was actually themselves calling out to
Yeah,
them, which was an interesting little wrinkle in the story.
it was. And that was also our introduction to the dinosaur.
The pterodactyl pet dinosaur.
Yeah, like almost like a mind controlled dinosaur, the way he was able to manipulate
Um,
it into just doing whatever he wanted. I feel like there's a bit, it's a bit of a suspension of disbelief with some of that, or unless they're, I guess we're supposed to think that they've got some kind of sci-fi alien technology that can, it's more than can be explained or something.
yep. And then they sort of explain what the Old Watch is doing and what the STF are doing a bit more as well. Did you sort of think that they presented two compelling sides of the argument for both groups?
Yeah, it does make it a bit more interesting that there's not just a clear cut baddie or goodie or whatever. It is hard to know whether they're telling the truth, I suppose, with just how, you know they're such a violent, they have been such a violent group, and they're obviously willing to see people get eaten by pterodactyls as well,
Mhm.
who stand in their way. So I feel like they are still the clear villain of the series. It's just that you kind of understand their motivation a little more, and where they're coming from. Um, and then, of course, you have the twist of Prior kind of turning to help them, which I might have to go back and rewatch that, because I was kind of like, oh, now she's on their side. That was a very quick kind of turnabout for me, but maybe I just lapsed in my attention for a moment,
No,
and it was explained a bit more.
I felt the same way. It was kind of an out of the blue turn where she had been so Terminator-esque of move
Yes.
forward, take out these people because they've been told to, and then all of a sudden she's on the girl's side. I was like, wait, where did that come from? So, like you, I think that episode will need to be rewatched if we get a season 2.
Yeah. She was gunning down all of her friends and everything. Like she she didn't care
And we get the bugs, the robotic bugs come
like for
back
some
that
reason.
again still doesn't look great. Um, and then in terms of like the big cliffhanger moments, the girls are put in 2 separate time travel pods and
Mm.
shot off. So I liked that it ended that way, where they are kind of splitting the group, but it'll be interesting to see how they bring them back together, because this show is so reliant on the dynamics between the 4 girls. It would be strange to split them for an extended period of a season 2.
Yeah, it will be interesting, I guess. It's an easy comparison, I guess, but there have been like a lot of times on Stranger Things where they'll split up the group for the season into two different kind of maybe kind of like an A story and a B story, and I guess they'll have to do that at least for a little bit, as Tiff and Erin end up in what 1950s or something like that, which
Yeah,
will have
Aaron and
some
Tiff are in the
interesting
70s.
implications. 70s, yeah, it'll have some interesting implications, like racially, for a African American and a Chinese um, girl to be thrown into the 70s just like that. Um, yeah, I'll be interested to see how that goes. Definitely, and I feel like that has to be the reason that they chose those two. It would be probably a bit more um, unsettling for them to have to face, you know, that kind of change in culture that's even more exaggerated back then.
And then that makes me also wonder where Mac and KJ got sent as well. Did they go to a similar time? Like, did they go
Yeah,
back to the
we don't know.
80s or did they go like future? So I, I like that idea of, because I haven't read the comics, I'm totally blind as to what this cliffhanger suggests. So I thought it was a great end to the season, even though, like we said, this episode felt, again, a bit rushed. Like, it felt like this season started strong, or started a bit weak, got really strong through the middle portion where we just sat with these characters and focused on their short journey over a few days, and then we rushed a big chunk at the end to wrap up parts of the story and leave this big open cliffhanger at the end.
Yeah, they could have done with an extra episode in there to avoid it feeling quite as rushed as it was. But yeah, I think, like you said, the cliffhanger does leave it enticing for a second season. We don't know anything about where Mac and um, KJ end up. So whether they land back in the 80s, but they realize that they're missing their friends and they want to find them, so they go on an adventure to pull them back from the 70s or wherever they end up. I don't know whether they have the walkie-talkies still, so they'll maybe be able to communicate across time in that way. That would be interesting if that's the case. But yeah, they'll have to find some way to get out of this mess, because that's what the show's all about, I suppose. But yeah, I'm really hoping that it gets renewed for a second season. It'd be a major disappointment for it to just end where it is. And
Oh,
I don't know, is your gut feeling that Amazon will be able to bring it back?
based on sort of the reactions that the show is getting, I think it will come back for a second season, and then it'll be, I think the question will be, do we get a third and fourth?
Mhm.
Like, if there's a big drop off on season 2, we might not get a third, but if the momentum continues to build, kind of like we saw with Stranger Things, where the longer and longer the show has gone on, the more popular it has become. But yeah, based on how this ended, the reactions it's getting so far, I would be absolutely stunned if we don't get at least a season 2.
Yeah, I think it would be wise for them to end season 2 with proper closure, but then kind of leave it lingering for the possibility of that third season. In similar ways to, like, I think Stranger Things has done a really good job of wrapping up the story each season. Like, the big bad is always defeated, but then there's this little, like, typical horror movie ending of like, but
Maybe it's not.
hold on, there's still something going on that's a bit weird. So I feel like that might that might be a smart way to end season 2, just in case it doesn't get renewed. But they might want to end it with a cliffhanger so that they have to bring back another season. That could always be a strategy too.
I guess, yeah, that will also all kind of depend on if Amazon only sign them for one more season, or if they really knuckle down and go, yep, we're committed to this. We're going to sign you for at least 2 seasons, which does happen every now and then, where they'll lock a series down for 2 seasons after one successful one.
Yeah, I mean, from everything I've seen, like just on socials, it's been like, everyone please watch this. It's fantastic. So yeah, I haven't really heard any hate for it, which I'm sure it exists because it always does, but it's quiet, at least in my part of the world. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that someone like your dad is suggesting it to people as well, I think that's a good sign that it isn't just catering to a niche group of like nerdy people like us.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the last little note I had,
Definitely. Like he's very, like, he loves all this. So I was just gonna say, like, Amazon has a lot of stuff that, like, all the Chris Pratt action movie stuff is right up his alley.
Mhm.
That Amazon seems to be doing a lot of. So the fact that he even watched Paper Girls is a kind of a miracle. It's the kind of thing that I would have maybe recommended to him and said, "Oh, you might like it," but then for him to tell me to watch it was pretty funny. So yeah.
Yeah, Amazon really is like, they're very segmented in the offerings that they have. There's the all or nothing sports style documentaries, there's those Chris Pratt action movies. And then over here we've got The Boys, Paper Girls, Invincible for like the real nerd-centric people. That very strange offerings on Amazon, but I love it. And then, the last note I had was, did you pick up on the little Easter egg at the cemetery?
Sorry, I missed that last bit. Did I pick up on?
There was an Easter egg at the cemetery.
Did I pick up on it? Tell me what it was. I can't remember.
So the Easter egg is one of the headstones says Vaughn, and it's the writer of the comic book was Brian K. Vaughan.
Yeah, no, I totally missed that. Yeah.
So
he's done a fair bit of work. In I think he wrote like some episodes of Lost as well, which I noticed when I looked him up. So that won me over, being a big fan there, like 5 or 6 episodes. So yeah, that's a nice little Easter egg there.
Yeah, and that I think cemetery is kind of like the best place for people to put Easter eggs, because unless you're really focusing on looking at every single headstone, you're probably not going to pick up on that sort of Easter egg. I didn't pick up on it until I sort of started doing some research. So really cool.
Yeah, cemeteries and the contact lists in people's phones as they scroll through as well. It's a good place to hide names as well.
Yeah, and like movie cinemas on the banners as well. They always put random little Easter eggs up in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's Paper Girls, a very surprising and really good watch that I, like I said, went into it after seeing the trailer with middling hopes of this could be really interesting, but was pleasantly surprised by what I did end up getting.
Yeah, I guess at the risk of like offending people that were fans of the comic book, I'm just really glad to have more things that are like Stranger Things, because I love Stranger Things so much. So to have another show about young people with 80s influences, taking the best of different kinds of inspirations from different media over the years, I really like that. I mean, I guess just love the sampling of pop culture that has gone on in not just Paper Girls but Stranger Things, and hopefully some other series too, because it gets a bit tired just seeing like young adults all the time and the same action stars and the same whatever. It's like, yeah, give us some kids who don't even understand what life is yet. Like, let's see them go through some of this stuff and try and figure out how it works, because it amplifies even more that feeling of what are we supposed to do. And I think we all connect with that as well. Like, we're all just trying to get through life with our own like anxieties or like whatever it might be that people are facing, their own dramas. And for some reason, when teens go through it, it's very relatable, because they're vulnerable, and I guess we're all vulnerable in different ways, but to have younger people experience it, they don't have the preconceived notions that adults do. They're not trying to, worry about all the same things that have bogged down adults. It's just they're able to be a bit more raw with it, I think, and it's just more interesting to me at the moment.
Yep. So yeah, that's everything. Thank you everyone for listening to the commentary booth. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe on podcast services and on YouTube. You can follow Jono on Twitter at Jono himself, and you can follow me on social media at JamyUpsMedia and at Pario Magazine. Thanks for jumping on the show, Jono, and good luck with all the writing and work side for you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been great to come on the show, talk Paper Girls, and hopefully we can talk about season 2.
Yeah, and hopefully we won't be waiting too long for that.
The Commentary Booth is a fan-funded production of Jamie Apps Media. You can support the podcast alongside our magazine, Pario Magazine, on Patreon at patreon.com/JamieAppsMedia. The following people supported at the community support group level or higher, and you cannot fathom how incredibly appreciative we are for their support. Brian and June Hart, Blake Robinson, Rena Renee, Courtney Paulson, Darren Hatcliffe, Jackson Carr, and Tracy Apps.